Thank you very much, Prof. Patel, for your presentation. We now give the floor to that's what I'm saying. We now give the floor to Professor Masahiko Asada. I now invite Professor Bimal Patel, a member of the International Law Commission, to deliver his statement, and they can come to the top table to deliver from. I think also Professor Assad can also come here. Oh, they're coming together. But we will start with Professor Patel. Yeah, thank you. You can proceed.
Namaste. Good morning. President of the 61st annual session of the AALCO, as well as the outgoing president of 60th session, Secretary General, esteemed colleague Ambassador Puneet Powadol, Excellencies, legal advisors, my colleague from the ILC, and participants. Distinguished colleagues, a document containing detailed statement on the work of the ILC during its 74th session and the specific advocacy efforts to ensure equitable representation of Asia and Africa constitutes part of the said document and is circulated today. The 74th session of the ILC marked a unique session in that there was a 50% turnover in the membership, with 18 new members joining the Commission for the 23-27 quinquennium. Further, half of the ILC is now represented by states from Asia and Africa, with 17 members of 34. The new quinquennium also saw 3 new topics, namely repression and prevention of piracy and armed robbery at sea, settlement of disputes to which international organizations are parties, and subsidiary means to the determination of rules of international law being deliberated for the first time, and a new topic on non-legally binding international agreements being elevated to the active agenda of the ILC. Other agenda items which saw continuing discussion were sea level rise in relation to international law, with a first and second reading for immunities for state officials from foreign criminal jurisdiction and general principles of law, respectively. The session also saw the constitution of the working group on the long-term program of work and the methods of work, while the Commission of Bureau also decided to create an open-ended working group on piracy to support the special rapporteur in the development of commentaries. As far as the composition across special rapporteurs and working groups was concerned, the numbers showed that much remains to be worked upon to ensure regional parity and representation. There were 2 chairs from the West Europe for the 74th Commission, split chair for the first time in the ILC history, 2 special rapporteurs from Africa, 2 from Latin America, and 2 from West Europe. Besides, 1 chair of working group from West Europe, 1 chair of open-ended working group from West Europe. By objective standards, the regional representation within the Commission remains with much to be worked for, considering very little representation of Asia. From the perspective of Asia and Africa, some of the agenda items do not have a consolidated study on the practices of Asian and African states, as was identified by the Special Rapporteur August Reinisch of Austria in his first report on settlement of disputes to which international organizations are parties. And he mentioned, the question of disputes involving international organizations has not been addressed in a similar way by the Asian African Legal Consultative Organization, the African Union Commission on International Law, or other comparable bodies. Although the reality remains, there is significant volume of state practice which exists on the exact subject matter. An ALC member from Asia and Africa have been attempting to bring such practice to the Commission through their submissions, statements, and contributions to multilingual bibliography. Perhaps a reflection within at the present ALCO annual session would be useful to project Asian African practice on the same plane as Western European or Latin American practices. A similar such phenomenon was observed in the freshly elevated topic of non-legally binding international agreements, now being headed by Mr. Mathias Forto of France. The topic has seen wider study since 2021 by the Committee of Legal Advisors on Public International Law of the Council of Europe, and since 2020 by the Inter-American Juridical Committee. Albeit, no such similar collection of practices study exists for the Asian and African states, or no such guidelines and recommendations have been crafted considering the collective practice of Asian and African states despite widespread use of non-legally binding international instruments by states in Asia and Africa. It is imperative that a project exclusively focusing on Asia and Africa being undertaken for its utility within the regions. And secondly, as the International Court of Justice has been examining and is called upon to pronounce on the international legal aspects of such instruments, such study will bring correct and contextual perspective before the international courts and tribunals, including ICJ. Considering the expanse of state practice on the matter, the special rapporteur had rightly identified the modality for the topic and stated, preliminary examination of the topic could also lead, if necessary, to the use of a study group provided that its work is fully transparent. Although the process of elevation of the topic to the active agenda did not grant any reasons for ruling out a study group or the appointment of a special rapporteur, which could have certainly been a more inclusive process. Further, the tradition of regional diversification has been a long-standing tradition of the ILC and has been reiterated through the decades, most prominently on the 50th anniversary of the Commission in 1998, where the Commission in paragraph 186 stated, in practice, special rapporteurs tend to be distributed among members from different regions. This system, provided that it is applied with some flexibility, has many advantages, in particular in that it helps to ensure that different approaches and different legal cultures are brought to bear in the formulation of reports and proposals. Although such diversity has remained to be much hoped for. As far as the special rapporteurs are concerned, out of 84 special rapporteurs over the last 75 years, that is 55% are from West Europe. Latin America, Africa, and Asia have 13%, and Asia has seen the least special rapporteur only 5%. If the same information is seen from one quinquennium to the other, over the last 15 quinquenniums, West Europe has been in the lead in the determination and shaping of the international law on various issues, followed by Latin America, East Europe, Africa, and lastly, Asia. Considering the repeated allegations of Eurocentrism of international law, the underlying need remains that Asia and Africa need to take a more proactive approach in becoming special rapporteurs and or chairs of working groups to contribute towards the progressive development of international law and its codification. Africa and Asia cannot be remained in the periphery under one or other reasons. Further, the representation within the chairs for the long-term program of work of the Commission has also seen sharp regional variations. The chair of the long-term program of work since 1990 have been occupied by West Europe 4 times, Latin America 3 times, Africa not at all, and Asia 1 time. The spread of chairs, even on this matter, has been far from equitable, indicating the need for Asia and Africa to take a proactive and affirmative role without much prolongation. The open-ended working group at the Commission have been constituted on 8 occasions for the topics of fragmentation of international law, most favored nation, obligation to prosecute and extradite, sea level rise in relation to international law, succession of states to state responsibility, and prevention and repression of piracy and armed robbery at sea. In this regard as well, the data is quite skewed, with 64% chairmanship held by West Europe and only 9% by other groups respectively. It is therefore imperative for ALCO and African Asian countries to reflect on the nature of its engagement and involvement in the process of international lawmaking. Such engagement can be enhanced through several initiatives, and some of which I will discuss below. Such challenges require a whole of the ALCO membership effort and beyond the ALCO membership, including all states of Asia and Africa, and concerted work on the various agenda items on the ILC, including sustained advocacy during the debates in the 6th Committee of the UN General Assembly. For instance, on the previously mentioned topics of settlement of disputes to which international organizations are parties and non-legally binding international agreements, the ALCO membership could explore the possibility of creating a subcommittee or working group wide Rule 14 of ALCO statute to undertake studies in parallel to the Commission, albeit with a mandate defined by ALCO member states. Such a working group could be developed along the lines of the proposal developed to enhance cooperation in combating cybercrimes through ALCO-based study on the topic of international law in cyberspace, as an agenda item deliberated at the 53rd annual session of ALCO held in Tehran in 2040, and it was accepted by consensus. ALCO may therefore consider the formation of an open-ended working group focused on select ILC topics to generate valuable inputs to the ILC, thereby incorporating and promoting Asian African legal practices and ensuring universal content and approaches to the work of the Commission to make the Commission output more credible and acceptable to the entire international community. In the spirit of promoting inclusivity and regional representation within the United Nations, it is essential to draw parallels between the current state of engagement in international law and a historical precedent. Much like the situation in 1970s at the International Court of Justice, where the World Court faced a limited caseload, we now find a similar issue of unrepresentativeness in the arena of international law. To address this challenge, it is worth considering a proactive approach inspired by the United Nations General Assembly's call for review of the role of ICJ back then in 1970. Similarly, today, Asian and African states could initiate a study either at the level of ALCO or through collaboration among member states. This study would aim to evaluate and recommend a review at the 6th Committee level, focusing on enhancing the utility of the products of the UN International Law Commission. The overarching theme of this exercise would be to identify priority areas for states from Asia and Africa in the realm of international law. It would also seek to bolster the role of the ILC in contributing to the international legal order and advancing the progressive development and codification of international law. Given the ILC status as a technical legal organ of the General Assembly, there is widespread trust in its ability to play a pivotal role. One of the key outcomes of these endeavors would be to solicit recommendations from states, emphasizing the areas where their views can have the most significant impact in strengthening the Commission's role. This approach ensures that the voices of Asian and African states are listened and integrated into the international legal framework. Furthermore, member states should consider developing a coordinated strategy to work in harmony. This could involve devising clearer and more organized approaches to selecting topics for the ILC work or submitting best practices to the Sixth Committee. By working together cohesively, Asian and African states can amplify their influence, contribute meaningfully to the development of international law, and create a more balanced and representative global legal landscape. Another area of engagement, perhaps at the level of the Commission, that may be considered is defining the methods of work of the Commission. More precisely, covering a comprehensive array of areas to enhance transparency and accountability to the primary clients of the Commission, that is the member states. In my time at the Commission, I'm working upon filling these gaps. For instance, an area identified currently at the Commission is the lack of availability of a defined process for the elevation of a topic to the active agenda of the Commission. As per practice and previous decisions, the Commission had developed a four-fold criteria comprising: 1, the topic reflects the needs of states in respect of progressive development of international law and its codification. Topic is sufficiently advanced in terms of state practice to permit progressive development and codification. The topic is concrete and feasible and reflect new developments in international law and pressing concerns of the international community and topic meet the above mentioned criteria. The same could be brought into the long-term program of work, albeit with a consensus of all ILC members. Although what the Commission is yet to develop after 75 years is a defined criteria for the elevation of a topic from the long-term program to the active agenda and the requirements it must fulfill. Further, considering the emerging practices within the Commission on developing topics through study groups, agenda items such as fragmentation of international law in recognition of the uniqueness of the topic which lent itself more to the undertaking of a research study as opposed to the formulation of draft articles. Study groups have also since been established for the topics most favored nation clause, treaties over time, sea level rise in relation to international law. Instances of such practice has witnessed a more inclusive process of development of international law, with a more concerted efforts towards the inclusion of regional practices as evidenced in the latest study group on sea level rise, which my colleague, Mr. Masahiko Asada, will deliberate. In this regard, and as a matter of suggestion, the ALCO member states may consider recommending for replication of such best practices on a consistent basis to the various upcoming agenda items of the Commission to ensure that the views of Asian and African states find appropriate reflection in the work of the Commission. As far as the long-term program of the work is concerned, 2 members from Asia, 1 member from Africa, 1 member from East Europe, and 2 members from West Europe have suggested new topics for the consideration. These include accountability of crimes committed against UN peacekeepers, a topic which requires urgent and dedicated focus of all contributing troop hosting countries and the UN system as a whole. This particular topic has been co-sponsored by 80 states, including the vast majority of ALCO member states. This topic has been proposed by myself, and may I request that ALCO, the 61st session, positively considers to inform the 6th Committee of the General Assembly next week to refer this topic for the International Law Commission before much prolongation. Secondly, a topic on protection of foreign investment in international law by Ms. Mangklanathanakul from Thailand has been proposed, which is very vital for the developing countries. Mr. Mingasang from Democratic Republic of Congo has proposed topic on the principle of non-intervention in international law. Due diligence in international law and artificial intelligence in international law topics have been proposed by Ms. Ridings from New Zealand and Mr. Einar from Norway, respectively. And compensation for damages caused by wrongful acts has been proposed by Mr. Paparinskis from Latvia. As far as the topic of succession of state in respect of state responsibility is concerned, there was a chair by Mr. August Reinisch of Austria, who held meetings to consider the way forward in relation to the topic. I, among others, made analysis of 6 issues concerning the topic, namely, firstly, to need study practice as comprehensive as possible. Secondly, theory of automatic succession versus non-succession, consistency with the Vienna Convention of 1978 and 1983 and articles on responsibility. Third, relative of agreements between predecessor and successor states. Fourth, impact of succession on transfer of obligations arising out of international wrongful acts. Fifth, succession when predecessor state exists and succession when predecessor state ceases to exist. And seventh, reparations. Based on the analysis of oral and written statements made by UN member states at various sessions of the 6th committee, we have underlined that all states have appreciated the work of the Commission and agreed the work shall be completed, especially keeping in view the need for clarification to the comments made by a couple of states, only a couple of states expressing reservations and criticisms. As the ILC works keep the need felt by the state as one of the cardinal principles, the work shall be brought to logical conclusion, as it will fill, among others, an important gaps in international law. In view of the fact that member states have shown the flexibility and approval to change the final outcome from draft articles into draft guidelines as recent as the last year, this work, the state succession work, shall be completed by the Commission. Recognizing the extensive research work carried out by the former Special Rapporteur, commendation appreciation by member states, among others African nation states, huge amount of time, energy and resources devoted in the last 6 years, and appreciating the dedication and assistance extended by the UN Secretariat, and echoing the need for the utility of the topic expressed and mandate given by the member states, and their continuous engagement, including agreeing the final outcome on the topic, and finally emphasizing the principle and practice of the Commission, it is sincerely hoped that the work on the succession of states in relation to state responsibility is brought to natural and logical completion in form of guidelines and commentary. AALCO member states' practice with regard to the topic is essential, and I have underlined the need for research to make the outcome as comprehensive as possible. Participation of several AALCO member states in the 6th committee debates so clearly and keen interest and needs of African nation states to fully consider their views while finalizing the draft guidelines. I have emphasized that states across all regions have direct and legitimate interests, needs, and concerns to pursue the topic. The reputation, credibility, and the eventual trust of the 6th committee and the international community in ILC is important. Neither legally, nor institutionally, nor from states' interest, there is any sound, valid, and substantive basis to either discontinue the work or not to appoint a new special rapporteur, as more than half membership of the quinquennium consists of new members, and as the topic was given very limited allocation of time in the second half of the 74th session, it is important that the ILC, including myself, will try to get more amount of time, appoint a new special rapporteur, and proceed with the completion of the work on the topic. Distinguished colleagues, the Commission regularly calls for submission from states on specific questions and calls for state practice to inform its work. Although submission from states are variable in nature and dependent on various factors such as timeline, complexity of issues, relevance, needs of states' capacities. For instance, the Commission has requested the submission of practices on the following agenda: prevention and repression of piracy and armed robbery at sea by 1st December 2023. Sea level rise in relation to international law, 1st December 2023. Immunity of state officials from foreign criminal jurisdiction, 1st December 2023. Subsidiary means for the determination of rules of international law, 1st February 2024. In this regard, perhaps an AALCO-wide process where wide topics are reflected and deliberated at a working group could be reflective of common minimum Asian and African practices or be made available as a repository of Asian African practices on these 4 topics at the earliest. Finally, the Commission has decided to hold 75th anniversary commemorative event during the first part of its 75th session in Geneva that will be held from 15 April to 31st May 2024, which will include a solemn meeting of the Commission to which dignitaries including the UN Secretary General, the President of the General Assembly, the President of the International Court of Justice, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, and representatives of the host government would be invited. And 1.5 days of meetings with legal advisors of Ministries of Foreign Affairs dedicated to the work of the Commission. The Commission is also encouraging member states, in association with regional organizations such as AALCO, professional associations, academic institutions, and members of the Commission, like myself, concerned to convene national or regional meetings which would be dedicated to the work of the Commission. In this regard, participation of delegations based in Geneva of Asian and African states, in my view, would be very useful. May I also request President of the 61st session of the AALCO and the AALCO Secretary General to consider organizing a solemn event marking the AALCO contribution to the work of the Commission, but also international law in general in this year. Indeed, it would be very useful if the member states of AALCO in particular and African and Asian states in general could also organize events at national level. A concerted, coordinated, and focused attention can indeed be generated. With these remarks and suggestions, I would like to close my statement. My intention in this statement was to sufficiently provide an insight in the challenges being faced by the Commission with regard to the issues of representativeness, diversity, and inclusivity. I hope more reflection would be possible on the suggestion proffered in this statement, and I remain committed to take proactive action on all these suggestions. As I said, a copy of my statement is made available to the delegations and observers for specific references. I take this opportunity, thank you for your kind attention, for inviting me to make presentation on my IALC topics, and I look forward to learn your views on the needs, concerns, and interests on the functioning and contribution of the Commission in fulfillment of its mandate under the United Nations Charter. Thank you.